Hey folks, welcome to Dojo Talks. Today we are again talking Magnus. We have dedicated a few episodes to him in the last year, but recently he finally officially announced that he is not going to be participating in the next World Championship match, which means that Ding Liren and Jan Nepomniachtchi will be playing the next FIDE World Championship match. And today, I guess we're gonna argue about what this means for Magnus, his legacy, the chess world, whether we think the winner of the Ding Nepo match is a legitimate world champion or not. Apparently, me and Jesse have a disagreement on this, which I wasn't aware of. So, Jesse, maybe let me throw it to you, and you could try to frame the debate however you like.
Yeah, so I'm the one who called for this meeting, this high council, because my understanding is that me and Kostya have an interesting difference of opinion, and I think other people share Kostya's strange, idiosyncratic opinion. Now, I'm not exactly sure what Kostya's opinion is, and so I kind of want to do this talk also to flesh it out because I want to actually like hear it developed as an argument. But now I'll tell you. So I think that the way Kostya sees it, he's going to correct me, is that the world championship match is not that important, and that rather the world number one by rating is what's important. And I think he referenced tennis. I could care less about tennis, but apparently that's how they do it in tennis. Whereas for me, the world championship match is a big deal. And I'll say more about that. But first, Kosi, did I kind of get that right as to where you're coming from?
I mean, I would say that's pretty close. I guess here's how I would rank things. If someone wins a match against another player, then they're the world champion, right? So if someone beats Magnus in a full classical match, that's the ultimate. And I love the tradition. I love the match tradition. I love studying the history of world championship matches. I love like all the story and culture around it. I remember reading about Fischer and all these like great players, and so I love the matches. So if someone beats Magnus in a match, then I don't care about the rating. They're the new world champion. That's the number one. Then if there is no match, right, no match happens for whatever reason. Maybe there's no sponsor. Maybe Magnus doesn't want to play in this case. Then for me, it's like, yeah, I don't care who wins the quote-unquote FIDE World Championship match, right? They could host it between Karyakin and Karpov if they wanted to, right? And say, like, that's the new world champion. For me, what's important is, like, who's the number one player in the world? Who's the best chess player in the world? So if Magnus plays, like, an official match and he loses, like, okay, then there's clearly someone better than him. But if there's no match happening, Magnus is the number one player. For me, he's the world champion as long as he still plays, Like, okay, if he retired and started playing poker or something, then fine, he's out of the game. He's like Fischer. Fischer wasn't the world champion when he stopped playing for me. But if Magnus keeps playing, keeps dominating tournaments, keeps his number one rating, then for me, yeah, like, it's kind of unfortunate, but yeah, it doesn't really matter who wins the FIDE title.
Okay, because when we talked about this last time too, you were kind of like, if he doesn't do it, it's no big thing.
If he doesn't play the match.
If he doesn't play the match, yeah.
Well, it's disappointing, but I totally understand where he's coming from, right? Like, he's played a lot of these already. He literally just played Nepo last time. Now he has to, like, prep 6 months for a match, whereas it sounds like he'd rather just be working on his chess and not worrying about this, like, one match and just trying to, like, raise his level, which personally I'm very excited about. Like, I love that we saw a new Magnus when he prepped the Sveshnikov for Caruana for their match. And then the next year he played the Sveshnikov and, like, destroyed everybody with black. I thought that was just, like, amazing. Like, we already knew he was the GOAT, but then he just, like, unleashes this, like, entirely new Magnus on everybody that can now checkmate you, in addition to grinding you into the end game. So yeah, I would love to see what Magnus looks like when he's purely just working on his chess. He doesn't care about this, like, one important match where 11 draws and he loses one game and all of a sudden he's, like, not world champion anymore. Like, so I totally get it from his point of view. And yeah, it's like, as long as there's no clear challenger, I don't think he should be forced. I guess that's really what I'm what it's coming down to for me. Like if there was a clear like number 2 player, someone who's like 2840, 2850, then I would say like, okay, Magnus, you have to play match against. Like how could you not? You know, you have to play.
No.
But until there's like a clear challenger, until Faruja or someone else gets there, then yeah, in my eyes, Magnus can do whatever he wants. He's still number 1. So how do you feel about it?
Well, actually, let's let David chime in first, and then I'll give my
I have very little to add.
You weren't disappointed, David, when Magnus... First of all, were you surprised when it became official?
That's one small difference. I'm not disappointed.
Okay.
I'm not surprised. It's fine with me. It doesn't matter.
Oh my gosh. Okay, yeah. So this is the debate. Does it matter? I think it matters a whole lot. I think Magnus really torched the chess world in a massive way. And maybe this is part of it, I guess, I'm guessing, is a generational thing, because for me, like I think to me it's obvious, but it's also just from where I grew up, is the trauma of the chess world really began with Short, after he beat Karpov, to then get convinced by Gary to create their own world championship. And that destroyed chess, made chess difficult, let's just say, for a long time of my, let's say, formative chess years. And what I foresee happening.
Wait. Tell us how, because I also didn't care about that. So tell us why that caused trauma.
Yeah, this is a debate for you guys, because I wasn't old enough to really worry about it either.
So, okay, let's just back up and do a little history. So, first of all, it's got to be said, FIDE only really got in charge of the world championship cycle post-World War II. After that, it was kind of like this club where it was kind of decided who was the world champion. Officially, no world champion until Steinitz in this time after he beat Sukertort in the 1880s. Now, one interesting thing, I just want to back up and tell a little history. The reason that begins then, it's important to say, is because no one wanted to call themselves the world champion while Morphy was still alive. So Steinitz wins a match in the 1860s against Anderson, and they're like, no, Morphy's still alive. We're clearly not on that guy's level. So we're not even going to talk about it as a world champion until he's dead. Okay. Also, from my historical understanding, to me, it really begins with McDonald-Le Bourdonnais. That match is epic. Both players almost die from health things, from nervous exhaustion. And one of the great things about the World Championship that I just want to cherish up front is it is the ultimate test. Like, it's people, when they think about chess, they're like, oh, it's some silly game. No, you look at the history of the World Championship match, we're talking about people who have almost died on several occasions. McDonald-Le Bourdonnais, that Zukertort Steinitz match, they were almost dead too. Zukertort basically died in that match. Karpov Kasparov, people almost dying. It's like a real test of your psyche, of your physical stamina, the whole thing. And a lot of it got watered down when the match cycle was shortened, right? To these like 12, 14, stuff like that. Also, it got a little bit watered down when there was no rematch. It used to be that if there was a tie, the champion, well, actually, whether it was a tie or not, the champion got a rematch clause. Yeah. Which made it really grueling for somebody to take the title. Okay. So how did this Kasparov thing affect the world of chess? It meant that the chess world got split in two, and that instead of there being a governing body dealing with the shenanigans that Kasparov created, it was just Kasparov out on his own, kind of sort of arbitrarily deciding who gets to play him. And that culminates when Kasparov is like, no, I don't want to play Shirov. Shirov like gotten the right to play him. And then Kasparov is like, nah, dog, nah, no one thinks you have a chance against me. The sponsors don't want it. No, I'm going to play Kramnik. And that's, of course, how he loses the throne. Was it karma? Probably. I mean, I don't believe in karma, but if there's anything that's karma, that was karma. You decide not to give Shirov his shot, and then kind of like the way Magnus wanted to play Firouzja, he wanted to play Kramnik. Kramnik beats him. And then the world is still not unified until much later. And then we get this whole unification process that finally, okay, got taken care of. Basically, decades went by where we didn't have a governing body decide who is the world champion. And it's a problem because the world championship feels far less legit when there aren't clear rules establishing who gets to play the world champion. Mm-hmm. And what's going to happen now? Same thing.
So you prefer for the world championship to belong to FIDE over,
I will say, to an organizing body, that at least feels kind of sort of neutral.
So when So when Kasparov defended his title against Short or then against Anand, I mean, he had a full-fledged qualification cycle for the title with Anand. That felt pretty legit to me, the match with Anand. What do you think?
Right, but it was kind of like the aegis of his whole, thing was like it was outside of. So instead of like taking over FIDE, mm-hmm. It was this outside organization, and it was always unclear who was funding it and what was going on and what the rules were.
That stuff is unclear with FIDE too. I mean, they had an interzonal, they had candidates matches. Mm-hmm. Leading up to Anand's challenge. I mean, it was an organization, just not FIDE.
And definitely, I think all chess fans can agree that we do not want to have two different world championship cycles. We don't want it to be like boxing where there's like 30 different champions and they have different belts and stuff. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened. And I just want to say this history pertains to the Magnus discussion, because at the time, there were intelligent people saying, well, FIDE did their matches, and then like you had Khalifman won one time, Ponomariev won one time, Anand won one time. And at the time, some intelligent people were saying, oh, this is actually the real world championship. Even Anand believed that when he won the first FIDE cycle thing. With time, with the benefit of hindsight, a little bit of time, it's clear that none of those guys were champions. Give me a break. It's clear. And you got to say then, like, in a way, it didn't matter whether Kasparov was playing or not. At that time, Kasparov was clearly so much better than everybody else that it would have been ridiculous to say that somebody else was the champion. So these matches that he was doing is kind of like, oh, man. I'm glad he played the matches, by the way. I'm glad he played the matches, even if it turned into a real shenanigans, especially with the Shirov story.
Well, Jesse, if I could hop in, I feel like that's exactly why, looking back on it, no one really questions Kasparov's reign until 2000, because he stayed active. He continued to play very serious matches against the world's best players. Like, okay, he didn't play Karpov, a fifth or sixth time, but yeah, he played Short, he played Anand, and then he was kind of vindicated. I mean, what happened with Shirov, I think, is truly a tragedy, but like, he was kind of vindicated in choosing Kramnik as the challenger, because Kramnik ended up, showing how to beat him, and I think was a very rightful world champion. So I feel like now we're going to just get a similar phase with Magnus, where we're going to have like a couple of years of FIDE world champions, but everyone's going to understand that Magnus is still the best. It's just that Magnus, I'm guessing, is not going to set up, like this separate world championship cycle. He's just going to keep playing normal events and just keep staying number one, and that'll be his way of staying like the real world champion.
Yeah, but it's totally uncool, because at least with Kasparov, it's much worse actually than the Kasparov situation. So let's just back up and say Kasparov, at least with the benefit of hindsight, seems like he was mostly interested by money. Magnus, though, is a gazillionaire. He doesn't need any money. This has been about money for a while, right? Might be better if he was motivated by money. In any case, his brand, I think, is going to take a huge hit from this. At least for me, it's taking a huge hit. I know other people feel like the same way I do. And so let's say he doesn't play for a while. Or he's going to play, or excuse me, let me rephrase that. He is going to keep playing, and his rating will be whatever it is going to be. He will eventually because he's past 30 now. He's going to start, the decline is going to set in. How long it takes, I don't know, but it's going to take, it will set in. And in this time where he's not playing, where we're just going to have to acknowledge him as the world champion, but he's not playing matches, it's a real problem. This could go on for a while. Well, and then, and then we're going to have these FIDE world champions that, like, I don't know, some people, like him back in the day in the 90s, some people really thought that, like, Khalifman was the world champion. And I know you already see it. You already see it, though, with this ding Nepo match. People are like, well, if they win, they win. That's it. And in a way, you got to say, well, like, in terms of fairness and the structure of how it works and yada, yada, you can say, you can make an argument. But it's weird because, like, with the benefit of hindsight into the 1990s, like, it's ridiculous to say that Khalifman was the world champion. Ridiculous.
I think everyone at the time thought so too. I mean, I never met somebody who thought that Khalifman was the real world champion.
Anand thought he was the world champion. He still says that. He's like, I won the world championship in the 1990s. No, you didn't, boss. But a lot of people think that. A lot of people.
No, but there's different kinds of world he's totally fair to say he won the world championship and also say that he only became world champion after he defeated Kramnik. Like, there's rapid and blitz world championships, and anyone who wins those is a world champion, and there's youth world championships, and anyone who wins those is also a world champion. So I mean, like, but okay, being the world champion is of course a different. But the FIDE knockouts title.
Were obviously not the world championship, and I've never met somebody who argued with me that the FIDE knockouts were the real, like, chess world championship overall.
Well, I mean, you can call it a world championship and still say it doesn't affect who the world champion is, right? Like not every world championship has to be a 10 out of 10 classic. There could be some really, like with the U.S. championship, right? Not every U.S. championship has been like the strongest players playing of that year, right? But it's still a U.S. championship.
But it was
that's
like
just how it goes.
Knockout with rapid chess. I mean, it was the World Cup champion, not the world chess champion.
No, I'm with you. It's like not a very, memorable format. Look, it's not like Magnus can just do whatever he wants. He does lose something out of this. When he's the world champion and he's the rating number 1, he can lose the rating spot. There was a moment a couple years ago where Caruana actually, if he'd won a game in like the Bundesliga or something, would have overtaken Magnus. But no one would say, oh, Caruana is a new world champion, because Magnus still had the title. People were just like, okay, well, that's amazing. Caruana took the spot, but okay, Magnus still has the title. But now that he's given up the title, he doesn't get that same comfort anymore, right? So if Firouzja or Caruana or someone overtakes him, then it's like, yeah, he loses a lot of his, let's say, rights, like a lot of his power, and then it does become murky as to like who is the actual world champion. But I like what Kasparov said, like, to be the next guy, you kind of have to either have to beat Magnus in a match, or essentially he has to like slip off. Like, no one beat Alekhine in a match because Alekhine passed away, but then it was like, all right, well, whoever wins the next tournament is the world champion, right? The show must go on. So if Magnus never plays another match again, but then slips to like number 2, number 3, then yeah, eventually, I mean, there's just going to be a new number 1, and they'll be kind of the new world champion. Well, it'll be like, I mean, we've had several of these cases before with Fischer and Karpov. Of course, Fischer gave up the title, but Karpov was then the number 1 player in the world, so it was a very natural thing, even though he never actually beat Fischer in a match.
Yeah. I mean, at some point when someone's got a rating that's really close to Magnus's, which I think mathematically has to happen at some point, right? I mean, either Magnus retires number 1, or at some point in which case he's no longer in the discussion for world champion if he's fully retired, right? Or at some point, someone's rating gets within, 10 or 20 points of his. And then hopefully at that point, it'll be interesting to see a match between Magnus and that person, whoever it is, who makes it up to, the 2850s or whatever. I would look forward to that match, and I'm fine letting Magnus do other things meanwhile.
So let me just put it bluntly. So look, at the moment, we're going to be calling, at least here at the dojo, we're going to be calling him the world champion. I guarantee you, and the chess world will be split on this. You got a lot of people saying that whoever wins this Nepo Ding thing is the world champion. So here at the dojo, I think we're all going to be kind of agreed Magnus is the world champion. But is it controversial? Of course it is. And the longer it goes on, if let's say this goes on 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, just keep calling him the world champion when he's not playing, oh, boss, this is a real problem. And then when does the world championship get rebooted? You've just killed Magnus. Listen, buddy, you are killing hundreds of years of chess history of the glorious battles of the past. You, my friend, are killing it. Why? I don't understand.
He's also contributed more to it than you have, Jesse.
What's that?
He's also contributed more to that history than you have. So
of course he has. I'm not debating that. He's one of the, you could call him the greatest of all time right now, but you are still killing hundreds of years of history. For what? I don't understand. So listen, it's a major problem, and then it's going to continue. This is the problem with this problem. It's not just like one thing. No, every day that passes gets worse. It gets worse.
It's okay. And I would ask you this question, Jesse. I mean, who's been a better steward of the world championship than Magnus, right? I mean, like you're complaining about Kasparov's track record with the PCA. I mean, which world champion was deserving of the title and treated it with the proper respect?
Well, right now, Magnus really didn't do himself a favor in that regard. I mean, is the guy an incredible ambassador? Until now, he has been. And then this thing, by the way, here's the other problem, my friends. These people at the top, at least many of them, are neurodivergent. And what does that mean? Their brains are functioning a little differently. No one understands completely brain science. It's very difficult. But it's clear that Fischer was also neurodivergent. And then as time progressed, as he got a little older, the problems that were inherent in being different became clearer and clearer. Is this the first sign of Magnus losing his mind? Maybe. Intuitively, that's what it feels like. That's what it feels like to me, because this decision is so nasty. It's so nasty. And there's a little bit of Fischer in it too. Like, I don't need to defend. I'm Jesse, the best. I don't need to defend.
Jesse, if you're doing X and then you think to yourself, I'd rather be doing Y. How does it reveal insanity to then choose to do Y?
Well, I'm sure Fischer felt that way too. And then we saw what happened. Right? We saw what happened. Now, obviously, Carlsen is not Fischer. And they were definitely both neurodivergent. We don't know exactly. I don't think anybody understands how these people's brains work.
Well, if we don't know or understand, then we can't say definitely.
I think.
Well, they're both definitely neurodivergent.
I think we got to give Magnus some credit. If he had like a shred of what Fischer had, like stuff would have been leaked. It would have come out already, like on social media. Like in this day and age, like if he had some like insane, like paranoid, like delusional thoughts, I feel like. Anyway, I don't want to get into.
I don't. This is what I'm saying. It's not expressing itself as paranoia. And the guy is incredibly, by the way, if you look at the interviews of Fischer back in the day, in his 20s, you're like, oh, this guy had it together. This guy was, Carlsen's a very suave dude, but you look at those old interviews of Fischer, you're like, oh man, this guy's presenting as if, he's got it all together.
I don't know. He started talking about like TV antennas like pretty early on. I feel like it wasn't.
I'm just saying, if anybody's interested, go watch the old interviews and you ask yourself if you think he was insane, because it'd be no. Your takeaway would be no. The guy's totally fine.
Jesse, he just wants to play chess. He just wants to play chess. He doesn't want to spend 3 months preparing. He wants to be in tournaments during that time. That's all Magnus wants. He just wants to play chess. He wants to be challenged. A match is not even challenging, and all the prep time he's not playing. So he'd rather just go to a tournament, beat people down, and wait for a worthy challenge. And meanwhile, set a goal of 2,900, where every time they get a draw, they're dragging him down. So he's sort of like fighting uphill.
By the way, of course, I have some sympathy with the idea that you can do whatever you want to do. I'm just saying, this is creating a problem for the chess community that will extend. And I want to say, like, for me, the World Championship, that's it, man. That is the event every 2 years. Like, it would be for a soccer fan, you take away the World Cup. Horrendous. And this is what, the World Cup actually can't get stopped. If one team, Brazil's decided not to play, it wouldn't be such a big deal. Magnus deciding not to do this, though, oh my gosh, this kills it. Now, will it eventually come back? Will the weight of history force the World Championship to be put back anew, refreshed in some form? I'd like to believe it. But people like Kostya, there's enough millennials out there like Kostya, like, it's not such a big deal.
Yeah,
he's number one, no big thing.
We're kind of ready for the change. Look, Jesse, you put a lot of faith into the World Championship, it sounds like. I put a lot of faith into the World Champion. And I feel like the World Champion is allowed some leeway in terms of actually shaping the chess world. They're the best chess player in the world. Like, it's not like an elected position. It's like Magnus has, I believe he deserves some say in how how chess is played. I think it's pretty clear he also wants to see like more rapid chess, and he wants to see more rapid and blitz taken seriously. And I feel like he said stuff in interviews where he's talked about how like rapid and blitz for him it kind of exposes the gaps more, right, between him and the rest of the field. So for him, it's like even showing a bigger skill difference, which makes it just like more interesting competitively. I feel like he has that right, and I like the classic traditional match system where like, okay, you have to beat the previous world champion to be the new world champion. But yeah, there's no reason to like force it on Magnus every 2 years with someone who's like, has like, I don't know, 20-30% chance every time. And then it's like, maybe not even that. Like, I don't even know. Like with the ratings, it's always very surprising for me. It's like, I think it's pretty fair to just, someone has to like cross a certain threshold, like 28-30. Let's say you cross 28-30, then you get a match with Magnus, right? And then there's actually some pressure and there's actually some motivation for him to play, because clearly you're extremely worthy challenger. Not that he doesn't have respect for all these guys, but I mean, he did play Caruana, like he played Nepo. I think if he played Ding, he would win as well. It's like he's played Ding quite a bit. So I totally get why he'd rather spend his time just playing tournaments.
Let me just say, by the way, yes, the match with Nepo looked really easy, but when you look at the Karyak and the Caruana matches, those could have gone either way, my friend. I mean, those are descended on rapid tie breaks. I think in a way it's we don't know exactly what he's motivated by. I think I smell some neurodivergent stuff. I also smell a little bit of fear because, right, you play somebody, let's say you play Ding a match. Oh, it's not going to be easy, my friend. It's not going to be easy. What's that?
Ding,
I get it. But by doing this, he escapes from ever having to do a real match again. And I don't like it. I don't, there's so many reasons. I don't like it as a fan of Carlsen, and I definitely don't like it as a fan of the World Championship.
I mean, how badly did you really want to see Magnus versus Nepo Part 2? Like, aside from the tradition, right? But just as like a sporting thing, right? Like sometimes you hear there's a tournament going on, you're like, oh man, I need to check that out, right? You hear there's a match going on, oh, I got to see what's happening. Do you really feel entspannt, right? For Magnus versus Nepo number 2. Are you curious to see what happens?
Oh yeah, I watched every single game. I was there every single game, buddy. I was there every round.
For number 2,
you'd be there for sure, man.
You're not on the edge. By the way, it's like, you know what would happen.
Well, think about it this way. Like, yes, but I learned a lot about chess from that match, and it's part of this tradition where, like, will Magnus prove himself to be the greatest player of all time? It's not just comparing himself to Kasparov and Fischer and the other players of the past. It's against the players who are to come, who somebody's going to come. And then even if we want to say he's the greatest of all time right now, there's some other kid's going to come up. And then we're going to want to have a sense of like, oh, how did Magnus perform under pressure? How did he perform against the best players of his generation? And yes, that was the key test. Now, let me put it back to you. You asked me how I feel about that match. Well, I'll tell you what, when he's going to play these tournaments, do I watch? Yeah, I kind of watch. But do I really care to? No. Do I care if he gets second place? Does it matter to me? No. Do I enjoy the games a little bit? Sure. But is it the same pressure as the World Championship? No. Does the greater world community care if you win some tournament in Serbia or wherever it is? No. The world needs, the world that is not the chess world needs the World Championship. That is how we project what our game is, because the world perceives it correctly as this epic battle of nerves, of will, of who is the smart. They like to think of it as who's the smartest. Fine, they can frame it however they want, but they get something out of it that they're not getting out of it when he plays some chump tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have an interesting point that the stakes on random tournaments he play, it's in some ways it's like lower, and we need some, there isn't a structure to the 2900 race the way there is to like candidates and then world championships and so forth. And so it would be nice if there were some event he was playing in that was somehow elevated and more important and like more epic, but I mean, already these matches have been watered down to 12 games. And honestly, I would be excited one day when there's somebody rated 2850. I'll be just dying. I'll be like, please, Magnus, come back and play this guy. And I think Kostya, maybe you would feel that too, right? Like if there's somebody who's really hot and really high rated and you don't know what would happen, you'll be itching to see them play each other.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would be perfectly happy seeing the Carlsen Nepo rematch, and I'd be very interested in those games, but mainly because I'm just interested every time Magnus plays anything. I think his games are just brilliant, and I'm just always curious to see what kinds of ideas he's trying out. But yeah, the thing is for Magnus, yeah, again, it's not like he can just do whatever he wants. He's the world champion until there's just a very clear challenger. And then there's like, okay, then there's some pressure on him, and then he can't just and then he becomes Fischer, right? So that's like the difference with Fischer. There was a very clear challenger in Karpov, who is younger, possibly stronger. They haven't even played yet. It sounded like Fischer might have even thought Karpov was just as good as he is, or perhaps even stronger. So that's why Fischer, he couldn't just like escape without facing the challenger. So for Magnus, until he gets his Karpov, yeah, he can just chill, play tournaments, dominate, and no problem, I think. And I'm very sorry to the rest of the candidates. It's like they worked super hard, but like, and they fully deserve to run the FIDE World Championship and get all they can from that. But yeah, if you want to be like the historical 17th world champion, you gotta take down Magnus.
Yeah, FIDE could just rename their event for like 5 years or so, the FIDE second best in the world championship, and they could just run a qualification cycle and a match, and just do that for a couple of years.
Well, I think that will happen. I mean, for me, I just call it a FIDE World Championship. It's very simple. It's like, you had your FIDE World Champions in like the 90s and in the 2000s as well, and then eventually there will be a reunification match as soon as Firouzja steps up, and gets to Westeros. Like then we'll have the unification.
Yeah, if Kosteniuk hasn't patented the vice champion term she invented, they call it the FIDE Vice Championship event. If that's not something they would get sued for.
I mean, actually, I wanted to say we had kind of a similar situation on the women's side for several years, where Hou Yifan wasn't playing the World Championship matches, and no one doubted that she wasn't the strongest female player in the world. But they still had, their own cycle, and we still had a women's world champion, and that was still a huge achievement. But it was understood. It's like, okay, if Hou Yifan played, she would be world champion, but she wants to do other things or play higher events. Judith Polgar, I mean, very similar, right? I think it's fine for chess history.
All right. Okay. Everybody's happy.
Cool. Well, okay. I guess we'll end it there. And yeah, I mean, the real world champions, whoever wins the chess.com global championship, obviously. That's the big one. I hope Magnus plays in that, actually. It'd be interesting to see
Me too.
what happens there.
Yeah, I haven't seen his name in any materials around that event yet, but I think that would be a great event to see him in.
Yeah, that would be cool. Okay, guys, thanks for listening. We'll end it there.